Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
All right. This is Tom Dutta here, host of the Quiet Warrior Show. Hey, I am the Quiet Warrior, and we're here live streaming across LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. And it's really exciting. I have a guest on today. Well, you can see him if you see the video, sitting there patiently. Great smile, good-looking guy. But before we get to Karl, let me just tell you that this show is being broadcast live. You're seeing it uncut and edited. We will be producing a YouTube premiere video as well as a podcast that will be sent out across the Quiet Warrior Show, some 11 countries now that we're in. So really excited to have Mr. KARL ROBATHAN. I still can't say your name. We rehearsed it so many minutes before and figured he's a Brit with a fascinating name. Everybody, I want to tell you a bit about the greatness of KARL, and Karl will bring you into the conversation. KARL was originally from Coventry, England, and he grew up in an economic downfall, decided to come to Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, which is where we both are now at the age of 17. And he started an incredible career in hairdressing. Now, I'm going to steal a thunder, but congratulations. Today, I believe, is the 30th anniversary for the hair salon Hair Mode. And that's unbelievable, Karl, because a lot of businesses close after their first year. So congratulations on that. KARL realized, however, during that journey that he was struggling with something that really impacted his life. And he had this fear, this longstanding fear that almost got in the way of him having. And we'll get into that backstory. You'll see a ticker running on the screen. KARL has a website. We'll talk about that. And really, he's found some passions and mentoring he does with others in a very, very important social issue that we're going to talk about today, which is mental health. And so, KARL, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, rowing in a basin, that's what I just came up with. So KARL, I want to start off. I'm just going to throw a question out at you. We're just going to have a conversation and riff on this. What's something about you that you think many people don't know?
Oh my goodness. Well, there's lots. Obviously, the mental health component over the course of probably from the early 90s when I first opened up the salon. I guess the fear, the stigmatism behind the mental health part, the anxiety, the panic, later going into depression. I really kept that very quiet to a lot of people until, obviously, as of late, the last 3 years of my life, I've really been dedicating that to mental health awareness. I realized that I had a purpose, and that purpose was, for me to share with others, to help others, and to end the stigma behind mental health. So I think that's the part that I think for many people, even the clients over the years, had no idea that was going on in my life. And the strange thing of all, the hardest thing for me of all, was the mirror. And heaven behold, my God, I was behind a mirror all day long. But the last thing I saw when I went to bed at night was me, and the first thing I saw in the morning was me. And there was some pretty hard words, reflections on me. And obviously later on, dealing with those downfalls that are, again, they're all mentally in my head. And so that's pretty much
thank you, KARL. That's amazing. And I'm just in my head, I'm going, as I said to you, I think three-dimensionally, I'm going in so many directions. As we were riffing just before we went on live here on the broadcast studio, you told me that they had a nickname for you.
Oh, yes.
What was that?
Okay. So, for years, I worked for a product manufacturer, Joico, and I was traveling the US, Canada, doing shows. And there was a gentleman who was in a management position after me doing these shows, going on stage, talking about the industry, life. And, he said, I was like a fighter. He says, like, Karl the Truth Williams. And nobody could take him down. He was always, standing up. And so I was named the Truth. So people who know me in my industry, and certainly in the hair within the company Joico, they all call me the truth.
Well, thank you, Mr. T. I'll call you the truth. So, Carl, that's a fascinating story, and now I want to really take us through the journey of your life. I mean, I say to some people, "Hey, start wherever you want. Start from the day you were born, or even before that." But I think in this particular case, I'm going to set it up because there's a story that needs to be told here about how you and I met. And I didn't tell you I was going to do this, but I'm going to have some fun with it. And so I say to all the guests who come on the show, check your ego at the door. And this is raw and cut. We're not hiding back from anything. We're only telling truth, as you said. So I want you to imagine the first time you met me, and just put that back in your mind, that exact moment, how it happened. I want you, when I give it back to you, to tell the story, to create a picture that people can see visually about what went down, how you met me, and what you thought about me. That's all I want you to do, what you thought about me. And then I'm going to take it back and see if we match on my story. And then we're going to take it into a little bit of brain science to explain that.
Okay. So I think the first time I met you, obviously, was at the brewery. You came and served me, and you came over. First of all, you introduced yourself to me, which is very unusual. And you realized that I was a regular customer there. And I was shocked. I was like, okay, there's something about you. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I did know that there was definitely something more to you than what is working in the brewery, and I couldn't figure it out. And then I think the defining moment is the time that you came over and says, look, you know what, if you ever need anything, you call me. And you gave me your information. And then I was shocked to learn when I actually looked, and that, oh my God, you're an author. And then I look at what the topic was, and I was like, oh my God. So that's the following time I saw you. I said, we have something magical, you know, like we have this connection. And it was the mental health component. So.
Yes. Well, thank you, Carl. And you know what? You nailed it. I mean, that is pretty much what happened, but it's interesting to have you explain it from your point of view. And so now I'm going to play the story back, and this is a teaching moment on the show for the audience to learn. And I'm going to talk about afterwards why I'm doing this with you. So just bear with me. So you mentioned the brewery. So I was working at the brewery. Now, many people don't, and I'm being all completely vulnerable here, but there are people in my following who know I'm a business executive for 30 years. I've been running and building companies. I have my own training and development company, but I had a terrible accident in fall of 2018, and I slipped and fell, no pun intended, and had a serious brain injury. At the same time, everything stopped. I blacked out. I fell in a bathtub. My eyes didn't work, my cognitive thinking. And what a lot of people don't know is when you are concussed, you can slip into depression and have mental health challenges because you can't see the way forward. And my doc said you should go out and do something physical to keep your body active, Tom, because you're going to sit and ruminate. And Carl, I was at home for almost a year wondering where my life was going to go. So I went out and I started finding some side hustles. And a friend of mine who bought a restaurant, their company bought a restaurant, texted me and said, we need some good people. We just bought a restaurant. Are you interested? And it led for me signing up. And I said, I'm in. And it was my first role. I've never done it as a server in a restaurant. I think at McDonald's, that was probably one of the first jobs I had, but I was cleaning floors, not serving. And so as I'm getting used to the restaurant, people say, there's Carl. He's a regular. And I'm like, what's a Carl? I see this guy sitting at a table, and he's suave, and he's got this gray hair and the glasses you're wearing. And I remember you wore a blazer. I'm very detail oriented, and you had an open shirt, and you looked pretty sharp. I had no idea what the hell a Carl was, to be honest with you. It's like, and you were there looking at your phone and sitting at your table. And when I came up to you and introduced myself, you were so polite, and you said, I'll have this. And I wondered, what is he thinking about who I am? But on the flip side, I just looked at you and I tried to figure out what's a Carl. And that was the moment where I was just being the server serving the Karl. But it was at that magic moment that you pointed out where I felt something, and I'm an emotion-based person, Karl, and there's something I was picking up, some energy, something you said, and I said, here's my information. And when we connected and you found out about my story, I remember telling you about my accident and what I was struggling with. I remember, do you remember this, what you said to me? I remember you said, and we exchanged messages, you said, this is the first time I felt that close
Yeah.
to someone being able to talk about my story. All right. So now that I've been made you feel uncomfortable and sitting there just listening to me blabber on, here's what I'm getting at. I want to bring in some brain science here, and then we're going to go back into the story. So everybody, this is what happens with mental health and why I believe, I'm an advocate, the stigma exists. Karl says, I struggle with maybe anxiety. All right. When I first met Karl, I didn't know that. So when I met Karl, what my brain does is, our brain, Karl, is a thinking machine. All it does is create thoughts, 30,000 or so a year or a day. And I look at you, and my brain is lazy, so it wants to tell me, what is this thought all about? It wants to help me understand more about what I'm seeing. And there's some things behind this about our thinking side of our brain, the sympathetic nervous system, which is the part of our brain that was created for fight or flight. It was the fight or flight response that was given to us. Some call it the reptilian brain, when man came on the earth, because you basically were given this brain to survive, not for happiness. And so fast the clock forward, when I learned this, the first thing my brain's doing when I see Karl is I'm looking at him. My brain's going back into my neural nets, which is all my thoughts from the day I was born, and I'm looking for things that resemble Karl. I'm seeing his big glasses. I'm seeing his gray hair. I'm seeing his stubble. I'm seeing how he's leaning, what he's doing, how he's talking to me, the British little twang in his voice. And you and I have that in common, although the twang's gone. I was born in the UK. So my brain says, this is what Karl is. And so what I really felt was, this is a good looking guy who seems sophisticated, who's in here having a beer, and he's on his phone. He's probably a businessman from the community, and I'm going to give him an experience, make him happy. That's all I thought. When Karl started telling me about his battle with mental health, guess what my brain started doing? It started going back to my neural nets and trying to take the words he said and what he was explaining and come up with answers to understand what that was. So, Karl, I'm going to just put this out there. It's very controversial, and thanks for bearing with me to explain that. I believe that the stigma of mental health comes from one very, very powerful thing, and that is most people are not knowledgeable, or they do not understand what it is. They go in, so when they hear somebody say, I have anxiety, their brain goes to its neural nets and finds everything they can find out about anxiety. And I'll finish with this. You know, when I was growing up, one of the movies that my parents had me watch, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Jack Nicholson. And as a kid growing up, I heard people saying, you're nuts, you're crazy. I used to watch the news and see things about these hospitals where people went and they had these shock treatments, and that's how things were. And One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that movie was buried into my thinking patterns, probably from the age of about 10 years old, because my parents let me see it. My brain is going like, anxiety, depression, this, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And I believe that that's part of the stigma. People don't understand what mental health is. They go and they find untruths that are buried in their thinking, and then they respond or react to the people around them. So let me give it back to you now. I've said a lot there, probably be the longest I'll talk on the show today.
Okay.
Tell me tell me back in the story when you discovered you struggled with certain mental health issues. Just tell me that part of the story.
Well, the thing is with mental health, it shifts back and forth. So I can tell you the defining moment when it happened. I was scheduled to open up the salon on January the 3rd. And I came down to the salon on the 31st of December. And my father was working in the salon. He was finishing off doing some drywall. And I look at the front door of the salon, and there's a big red sticker on it, and it says stop work order on it. And I walk into the salon, and my dad says, you're not going to be open. You're not going to be open on the 3rd. And I said, well, what's going on? He says, the plumber is not a plumber, and they want to see a proper plumber in here because of the job, you know. And I was like, oh my God. And I just started to freak out. So we went out that night because obviously it was New Year's Eve, and you know, through fear, and I've been drinking and so on and so on. And I wake up in the morning and I just had the massive panic attack. And if anybody out there doesn't know what that feels like, it mirrors very much a heart attack. Your chest gets heavy, you can't breathe, your arm hurts, all the things that measure up. So my mum ran to the neighbor next door who's a nurse, and she came over and says, no, she says, I think it's a heart attack. You've got to go to the hospital right away. So we went to the hospital, and lying there, and the nurse comes walking in, and the doctor, and they said, oh yeah, no, you're having a panic attack, because they explained everything what's going on in my life. And I'm like, why are they so, you know, like nonchalant about it? They're not running around like paddles. And I'm thinking I'm going to do heart, you know, get my heart rhythm back again. And they put an ECG on me, and they said, no, it's definitely a panic attack. And then I left the hospital feeling a little better, because they gave me some Ativan, which was the first time I had something along those lines. And that was the beginning of, oh my God, because I realized then that this was not controllable, and the fear of failure. And then I had the fear of the heart attack or whatever it was. And then moving forward, I thought it was going to be over. But then the reoccurrence happened over and over and over. So then I went to go and see my doctor, who said, well, Karl, you know, I really don't know too much about this, so we're going to have to send you to a psychiatrist. And then it carried on from there. So towards the end.
How old were you when you opened the salon? How old?
Yeah, I was, let's see now, I was 20,
okay.
Yeah, 20 when I opened the salon. January,
great.
My birthday, so just don't forget it.
Yeah, I won't. Yeah, absolutely. So let's let you catch your breath there, and I'm going to take it back and just riff on that. And my brain went in a journey in a different direction, and it went back to something you said to me. And when I give it back, you talk about your dad, but just as you grew up in Coventry, and then you left in difficult economic uncertainty, came to Canada. That alone, dude, is a courage. I mean, a lot of people I know, immigrants who leave their home countries, their culture, their comfort, and come to a brand new land. It's very traumatic. And then you're here and you have to start and be successful. I want to read something to you out of my CBT workbook. It's sitting here on my studio desk. And for everybody, CBT stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. And I asked Karl your permission before we did the broadcast if I could take some things out of this. When I went through my fall and my injury, when I couldn't see the future, I slipped into a cycle of depression and anxiety for the first time. I had my first suicidal thoughts early in 2019, and it freaked me out. Never had that before. And so they sent me to a course, and it was about learning skills. So one of the things I'd like to suggest, Karl, for you to talk to me about is, you know, you manage anxiety. I believe that mental health are normal conditions we have. They can become mood disorders, and we can learn skills to live and manage our lives. And there's nothing wrong with us. So I just want to read you something out of this. It says emotions versus moods. When an emotion is fueled and persists for days, it becomes a mood. Unlike emotions, moods lack a clear trigger and may last for months or even years. As an example, depression is a mood, but sadness is an emotion. And mood states like depression also include nervous system changes that show up in changes in physical health, on and on and on. When I went further and I was digging deeper into anxiety, just listen to this, and then I'm going to connect it back to a word you said, the word fear. This is labeling emotions. And one of the things I teach people who are trying to manage is let's start labeling the emotions that we're having. And when you were trying to describe what a panic attack felt like, my heart grew for you. I love you and your story, and that just hit my heart, just putting myself in that journey with you. This is what it says. There's a bunch of emotions: joy, anger, fear, sadness, shame, guilt. We'll just use those. And under fear are words like afraid, nervous, insecure, anxious, scared, worried, frightened, panicky, apprehensive, dreading, edgy, horrified, jumpy, overwhelmed, shocked, terrified, uneasy. I bet you I'm really motivating you right now, aren't I? With all these words. And I'm just playing with you in my dark humor, but it's brilliant because when I met you, I started learning from you, and you were telling me about your fears and you were using that language. And what I learned is that anxiety, a lot of it is based in fear. And so I want to turn it back to you, and I want you to talk about your growing up, your childhood, because sometimes the things we learn that are put in us are untrue. And when we discover that later at our later age, it unravels what we're talking about here.
Yeah. So go back to Coventry when I was very small. My father and I spent a lot of time together. I absolutely love my father to death. He was an amazing guy. However, he was very much a very proud person. He worked very hard for all he has got. He was really wanting me to succeed. And I want to measure up to make sure that he was proud. So I think the first defining moment that I had with him, I was probably only about 6, maybe 7. Keep in mind, Coventry was a factory town. It was full of car manufacturing. A coal mine was just right behind where we used to live. All of these places were being shut down, and car factories were being closed. So it wasn't starting to look very good at all back then. But I remember sitting in the backseat of my dad's car. We're downtown, and I said to my father, "There's a lineup of people outside, and they're smoking away." And I said, "Dad," I said, "what are all those people all about?" And he says, "You don't have to be like that. You know, I'm going to tell you right now, they're a bunch of yobbos." And he called them yobbos. And I said, "Well, what's it? Well, these people are unemployed, and you're very, very good at what you do. And, you know, you're going to be fine, and you're going to keep working. You're going to follow through, and don't be an embarrassment." And I was shocked because it was a very firm voice. And I realized then that that was a standard, and that was something that he instilled in me. And then moving forward from that, again, I explained to you right before the show, I was talking to you about he didn't want me to work in a factory setting. He wanted me to go into contracts. He wanted me to go into the business sector. And that was what his inspiration was for me. And I'll never forget it. And like I said to you before the show, I remember saying to him, you know, I was going to take business studies after school because we finished school at 16, and then I stayed on school for another year. But in between that, I came to Canada for a visit in 1984 to visit my sister and my brother-in-law, who are both hairdressers, or at the time was. And I came out here, and I loved it out here, and I wanted to be here. I knew I wanted to be here. This was the place for me. So I asked my sister, I said, "Okay, you know, I'm coming out there." So she took my transcript, looked around to see if there was anywhere available that I could possibly, you know, take business studies, continue it on. And of course, my grade point average wasn't strong enough. I was all CSEs, which in England is a lot different. CSE, O levels, A levels. I was all CSE, and I had 1 O level. And so my sister said to me on the phone, she's like, "Well, Karl, you know what? Why don't you try hairdressing?" And I've got to tell you, I'm like, "Are you freaking mad? Like crazy? Like, how am I supposed to deal with this?" Because, you know, like I've got to tell my friends that I'm going to be a hairdresser, and I've got to tell my dad, and again, the stigmatism behind that too, which was crazy back then. So I remember the defining moment sitting at the dining room table. My mum's on one side, my father's on the other. And I said, "So I think I'm going to go to Canada, but I'm going to do hairdressing." And I remember my dad's cutlery dropping to the table, and he was silent. It was dead silence. And at that time, I already spoke to my mum about that. Tom, I don't know if you had a different relationship with your mum and your dad, but I could tell my mum anything, but I couldn't tell my dad everything, right? So it was one of right? So a segregation was there, and I remember him looking at me like shaking his head, and he stopped, and then he carried on eating for a little bit, And he said, so how are you going to do this? And I said, well, Nicole's already said that there's a school that I could go to downtown, Moeller School of Hairdressing, and you can begin in September. And we're talking like the beginning of August right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Like a month away. But I have to go and get a student visa. So, and as I said prior to the show, I said, you know, I remember taking a drive down to London with my dad to go to the Canadian embassy to apply for the student visa. And we get into the car and he didn't say a word to me. Like, it was just, let's just get there. Let's get you this visa. And he was doing his duty as a father because he really wanted to pursue. But I know that I was disappointing him. And I felt it here. And the very day that I left England, he drove me down, and my mum drove me down to the coach station, which is in Coventry. And I had, as I said, I had 2 bags, and I had, I think, £200 to my name, and I was 17. And I looked at my dad, and I get onto the coach, and I sat on the seat next, and I look out the window, and I could see my dad's face. Still, I felt that, like, oh, I've disappointed you. And so a year later, the irony of that, a year later, my mum and dad did apply for their landed immigrant status, and got it. So they were coming out to Canada too. So when they heard how successful I started to become in hairdressing, my dad still, I could feel that it wasn't quite there, but you know, it wasn't until I was opening up my own business and he was helping me, because he got the better of both worlds then, because now his son's a hairdresser and he is in business. So
well, I'm smiling here, and first of all, you know, honor you for telling that chapter of the story. Everybody, we're about halfway through the interview, and Karl, I'm going to go along with you today. There's a reason, because when we produce the premiere YouTube video, everybody, we're going to actually bring into it some photos and a surprise video that is from an event Karl had that will blow your mind. So stay and keep listening, even if you have to come back again. This is live stream, and watch the production. There are so many things you said there, and this is getting closer to the truth about why I say people who have challenges with mental health, there's nothing wrong with people who have challenges with mental health. And you're proving it to us with some of your stories. So I'm going to riff at that a little bit with you. That, first of all, you did one thing that everybody in the world needs and wants, and that's to get a haircut. I mean, you look at the top of my head, I've got nothing up there, and this is my COVID cut, but when it comes back, I'll be sitting in your chair. And what did I do when I felt down, or I felt like I needed a recharge? I know maybe some women I know go to the spa and where they get their nails done. I loved going to get my haircut. And I remember when my boys were going, my stepsons, 2 of them, and my daughter, taking them to the barber and sitting in the chair, and then one by one, anchored with my barber, are lifeline stories about the people I love. Their stories, the things we talked about, we told. Whenever I think back about that chair and that guy cutting my hair, everything that I went through in my lifeline comes back. You have such an amazing job, man, to be able to connect to people and share and make them feel better about themselves. But I want to go back to the dad story. You and I were talking about this. You asked if I had what relationship I had with my mom. I could tell my mom stuff, but as people know from my story and some of the work I've done in my book that you've read, my father was a bad dude. He was a villain when I grew up. He was a commanding officer in the military, turned pretty bad, raging alcoholic. My home was full of violence, and it ended, and everything fell apart, and I was young. And what I learned that my dad, being a perfectionist, being a military man, the standards were way up here. I could never keep him happy. And my dad had a view, being a traditional Indian, and my parents are from Fiji, that there's a bit of a caste system where, you know, you should be a doctor, or you should be a lawyer, or you should be this status. And here's the thing I learned in my CBT, Karl, that I want you to know, and I know you know this from talking to you. I want everybody to know this, that most of what was put in us up until about the age of 15, we couldn't tell if it was true or false. And so going back to what I was telling you about the way the brain works, and it's a teaching moment, I want to share this because it saved my life. When we hear things from when we're born up until about age 20, we use the reptilian brain, the brain that doesn't know how to pause and have thoughts about those thoughts to see if they're real or not. So it basically wires them with synaptic connections, or little things that happen in our brain, into neurons, and then it attaches them to other neurons, and you have thinking patterns. Do you know what my number one thinking pattern was that I discovered? I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Do you know where it came from? Like you said, my dad died 2 years ago, and I may finally reconnected after 10 years. I hated my dad for the way he hurt the family, but I didn't really hate him. I hated his behavior. But that one thing that he would say to me, if he'd call me names because of the way I looked, and he'd call me a loser. It's funny when I hear your story and the pain in it, and you're such a courageous man, and so I see you as a hero, that we can tell that story over and over and over again like it happened yesterday. I'm listening to you going like, wow, did you write that down somewhere? No, it's because that's wired in our brains and as a thinking trap, and it's actually predominantly what happens as we sleep 24/7, as we ride our bicycles, as we cut people's hair, as we do this. Carl might say, Tom, you're a handsome, good-looking guy with that bald head. And my thinking trap saying, like, I'm not good enough because I was called ugly when I was stupid. That's the power of the battle in the mind with mental health. So let me just go one step further with that. Now that we know, I met a guy, Carl, and I'll introduce you to him through a TED Talk I did. And this is what he said to me. He spent most of his life on the downtown east side of Vancouver as a drug addict. Overdosed 6 times, told me he should have died 6 times over. Today, he's out. He's got family. When I was talking to him about why did you end up down there, he said, I wished my father would have punched me in the face, then said that one thing he said to me. And it was that chip on his shoulder he carried, and it was the same story. His father said, and his father was a traditional Italian guy, kind of rough around the edge, and he called him stupid, called him an idiot. And that wired into him, and he believed it because the brain didn't know the difference until it matured. And no matter what he did, what he accomplished, he felt he was letting down the world. And in my career, as I was like you, and I see you as successful, you said one thing in your story that just was amazing to me, Carl. You said when you opened the salon, you felt like you were going to fail, and you had this anxiety and panic. And if I heard that before I knew it, let's go, holy cow, are you kidding me? Good looking guy, dark glasses, swarthy looking. He's opening this business. He's 17, kick ass. I'm coming from Coventry, he's got this little attitude, and he's courageous to move to another country, doesn't know anything about it. He's starting his own business. Most people would move in and get on welfare and say, oh, I'm going to just feel sorry. You started your own business, and today, 30 years later, you're so bloody successful. It's amazing. Why do we look in the mirror then and struggle with the anxiety of saying we're not enough? We all have to find that one thing. And so, Carl, I'm honoring you with this part of the story. We're going to go now into the light. And everybody, when I produce the show art for this, you're going to see this amazing picture, Carl, that you gave me. It has a picture of Carl's face divided in the middle. One side is dark, one side is light. The darkness is when people hide in the shadows thinking there's something wrong with them because it's something that was told to them that's just not true, and it rules them. The light is when we find a way to use that as a superpower, and we turn it into something to go beyond and do something for others. We do something with it. So I want to hear now in the next 5 or 7 minutes from you, Carl. What did you do when you finally got some resources? What did you do with all this? And tell us about that 365 thing.
Okay, so the systemic thing with Thrive 365 was it was a defining moment. My mother had a massive infection, and she was in ICU, and she was undergoing her 4th operation, and a surgeon there by the name of Dr. Joyner at Lionsgate Hospital. The team there was fantastic. I can't say enough about Lionsgate team. She basically said, you know what, this is not the place for you guys. I'm here all the time. I see you here every single day. And she had said, like, do you do anything? Do you have any hobbies and stuff? And I said, well, I've been riding my bike. And she says, go, leave here right now and start riding your bike. And that was April the 8th. In the meantime, my mom is lying in ICU.
What year, Carl, sorry to interrupt you. What year was that?
That was 2018.
Okay, thanks.
April the 8th, 2018. So I get on my bike that afternoon. I finished at the hospital. I went straight on my bike and I went for a ride. And my mom at the time, she had about 16 machines around her, and we weren't even sure she was going to make it. And she was fighting. And I kept saying to myself as I'm riding my bike, you know what? My mom's the fuel for me. And I just carried on riding and riding and riding. And of course, it was, 10 days go by, 20 days, 30, 50, 60, and 100. And then I realized at that point, I'm thinking, gee, like, this is like mentally for me, it's helping me because I've got this massive anxiety of possibly losing my mom. Not sure what was going on. I've been making these absolutely crazy medical decisions on her behalf, which again, I can't say enough that if you're going to take that ownership of being, and this is part of my journey, I've been really strong about this. When you take on the responsibility of being a person's voice for them, that you make sure that you know exactly what their wishes would be. So if you can't walk, you can't talk, you can't go to the bathroom for yourself, because when you're sitting there and your mother, who's loved you, cared for you, nurtured you, everything, is look, the doctors are all saying, what do we do? Like, we're at this comfort care level 5 right now, and it was extremely difficult. So the bike riding for me really helped me, because I realized that was repetitive. And we talked about this one time when we got together, the more times that we can do things repetitively, the more you're able to focus in on what was going on at that time. So
right.
it was every day, and mentally I kept thinking, it kept going. And I think it was that day 260. I think it was something like that. And I'm like, oh my God, like I haven't stopped riding since. But at the same time, my mom hasn't given up fighting either. So I'm thinking, oh, okay. And then I thought, I wonder if I can do this for a year. Like, if I keep going, can I do this for a year? And then I started to talk to clients about mental health. And I'm thinking, well, let's turn this into a journey, because my mom's was in a care home with dementia. And, it's another form of mental health. So I realized that maybe I could make this my journey, because my friend Paul and Jen, who had light on PTSD, Jane Weller, who rode across Canada in 58 days from Victoria to St. John's, Newfoundland, spreading the word about mental health. And I thought, maybe this is my journey. Maybe I could use this as my tool. And I was like, yeah. So then I talked to my good friend Mary about setting up a website and talking about the journey and why we're doing, or the reason, my story. So I put that down all in script, and she worked with me on the website. And since then, I've just been working the whole program, just trying to really essentially help people who are, or families even for that matter, because the person in the chair, you don't really know what's going on in their world. And if we really know the stats, I think it's 1 out of every 3 people right now in the world that suffer from mental health. So 1 out of every 3 people that come into my salon, I know are dealing with something. So the more I can talk about it, the more that they're open. And I've spoke to parents, grandparents, brothers and sisters about loved ones, and I've helped them. And, just the fact that you go out there and you help somebody helps me become the purpose what I was doing it for. So my journey became more and more complete and more understanding why I was doing it. And, one of the things that you wrote on your, before we came on the show, and you says, when you can come out and say what you have to say, and it's not ego-based. That's exactly it. I mean, a lot of people don't understand the stigma behind mental health. And I believe when you understand I understand how I went through what I went through, my biggest fear was fear of failure. And that came from years of therapy. After I went through my whole, with the psychiatrist, I also had a therapist, Kathleen Colback, her name was. And she helped me go all the way back and identify that it was the situation that I never wanted to fail. And my father put that on me, never to fail. So the ride for me was again, it put myself out there, because I knew I still had to go through a winter time. and it was snowing. And so every day when it was snowing, I went out there and I was riding, and I had to do 20 kilometers. That was my goal every day, minimal. And I remember the blizzards and the ice, and I'm still riding. I fell off my bike a couple of times, but I managed to get home. And I think it was probably February, and late February, I said, I made it. Okay, I just have to ride my bike now, right? So, but I completed over 15,000 kilometers, 681 hours, and
Wow, amazing.
yeah. So, and again, I picked up photography along the way, which was my way of bringing to my mum these beautiful images. Because when I sat alongside of her in the hospital, I showed her the pictures, and she loved them because I'm bringing the outside to her. So yeah, it was beautiful.
What a nice son you are. I've just been madly making notes here. First of all, I love you and your story, Karl. And then this chapter of the story is so epic. Everybody, there's so much more to this. You'll see on the screen a ticker, if you're watching the video now, a ticker that has the website ride365.ca. Go check it out and connect with Karl. Be part of that tribe. Amazing. I want to talk about when I invited you to the show. Remember, I said that the narrative behind this show is the hero's journey, and if you remember that, Karl.
Yep.
And what the hero's journey is, for those who don't know, is it's based on research of Joseph Campbell, who's left us a library of university research that studying mankind in tribes back as far as you can go. You know, we all hear this call to adventure. We get to a point in our lives where we're in this ordinary world of working and on a treadmill, and we experience something, and usually it's not anything good. We have too much pain where we say, you know, screw it, we want to do something different. Not everybody answers the call, Karl. You did, you answered the call, but there's many people like you who don't answer the call and stay on that treadmill, keep complaining about life. They don't do anything about it. That's why you're a hero. Karl decided to get on his bicycle and ride 365 days, 15,000 kilometers, 681 hours. Holy crap. Dude, I did the Ride to Conquer Cancer over 2 days, 200 kilometers. I thought I was great. This is amazing. But I want to add to this something, everybody, and then I'll turn it back to you, Karl, as we finish the last chapter. I had this note down here about anxiety again. And when I took my CBT course, they gave me a fraction. I didn't ever have anxiety explained. So, Karl, if I said to you, explain to me anxiety, you would probably have a way to explain it. I bet you if you ask a lot of people, how do you explain what is anxiety? Would it be fair to say most people can't explain or describe it?
I would say yes. And the best way of describing it, if I was to give anybody who doesn't know what it's about, imagine if I was to give you a $500,000 car to drive, and it has so much power.
Yeah.
You have to listen. You have to turn the stereo off. You have to listen to the revolutions of the engine. You're scared about the road, about the cars on the road and everything else. Well, a person who lives with anxiety is that car, is that high performance car. It's ready to go. It wants to go all the time. And if we could manage, and this is where my thought was, when I realized where my anxiety, the roots of anxiety and what caused my anxiety, I realized that I could take that as a power rather than a negative and streamline it to do positive things. So it is an emotion and it is a feeling. So I think if you can turn anxiety from a negative to a positive and channel it in the right places, and we've had this conversation, Tom, numerous times, and I think that it is a superpower. And I think people who are living with anxiety has to understand, you know what, it's not all bad. You know what you need to do is to learn how to channel that energy.
That's right.
If you know how to channel it, you are the stronger person. You
Absolutely. Karl, so well said, man. I mean, I could have played that back as my explanation of it. The thing that you just said that inspires me, it's a teaching moment, is you said, I can't remember exact words because my brain was going everywhere, but it's a superpower. And everybody, Karl and I, when we were standing at the restaurant that day having this conversation, and I think it continued by a couple text messages, it was like, I don't know, we coined this phrase superpower, but you were saying it and I was saying it independently before we even met.
Yeah.
And so this is controversial to many people who don't understand mental health, but I'm just going to say a few things. Uh, we all have a brain. It's an organ in the body, and we need to get a checkup from the neck up. Yet, why can we go out and get our blood pressure checked and check every other part of our body? There's no
No.
stigma. My father was an alcoholic, and he talked about it. I drink a lot. There's no shame or stigma for most people because it's accepted. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, I believe that people don't understand what mental health is, but the truth is everybody has it. You're
Yeah.
either healthy or you're unhealthy. So here's something I want to share with you. This is the equation. And I'm getting all worked up here for a reason because I'm so excited because somebody finally explained and you're telling me and teaching me. Anxiety equation for thoughts associated with a feeling of anxiety, nervousness, or fear. A useful tool is the anxiety equation. This skill is based on the fact that anxiety often arises out of exaggerating danger and underestimating our ability to cope.
Yeah.
You just heard you and I both have the same story. Your father said something, and so you catastrophize, you exaggerate. Where sometimes a normal person or somebody who doesn't have anxiety, who's thinking patterns are normal, say, "Wait a minute, you just opened a business and you're 30 years out, and you're a superstar," and we start catastrophizing over little things that maybe didn't work. It's because of that, the way our brain was wired. Mine is the same story. Now, here's the equation. I want you to visualize this, Carl. The top of the equation, like a fraction, is the belief that bad stuff will happen over the belief that I will be able to handle it.
Yeah.
Okay. So anxiety equals the belief that bad stuff will happen over the belief that I will be able to handle it. What I heard you do, and it's brilliant, it's just amazing, is you found a passion in riding the bike and you found a passion in photography. Oh my God, everybody, you got to find this man's photography and what he's done with it. He's taken amazing photos and he's creating using his creative thoughts. He's creating quotes that just set my soul on fire. Carl, I hope that those sit in the halls of every school and in the homes of everybody out there. I know you have a way to distribute those now, but here's what I'm getting at. What Carl did in mental health skills, which by the way should be taught in schools, it should be taught to CEOs and business leaders who all deal with mental health. They feel anxious before board meetings. I used to go to my board meeting and feel racing and my blood going higher because I knew I was going to deal with tough things. And my brain was thinking, what if this goes wrong? Here's a controversial thought, which is quite true. 80% of people or more have anxiety. Does that now change the way we think about ourselves? There's nothing wrong with us. When a feeling or an emotion turns into a mood, which means it becomes general and chronic, which is what sometimes you and I experience, it's because of a virus in our thinking traps. There's nothing wrong with us. We're like everybody else. It's just that we have to learn skills, and you did by finding a happy distraction to go and focus your brain. And then what I love about what you did, Carl, is you found a way to turn it into a weapon. You weaponized it by going out and helping people with the platform, the work that you've done. Boom, amazing. Every day, why I love you so much is every day I know that you get up in the morning and we don't know what's going to be there, the dark or the light, and we have to continue to fight forward. But we're fighting for all those people out there who don't understand and don't have a voice. And you're educating us on this show. The last thing I want to share with you, and then I'll give it back to you to agree, disagree, laugh, smile, whatever emotion you want to share, Carl, is this blew my mind. And it came to me too when you were talking. It says anxiety pushes for behaviors that then make anxious feelings stronger. Think about that.
Yeah.
Anxiety pushes for behaviors that make anxious feelings stronger. So I'm going to take you into a thought, how a thought happens. You have something that triggers your thought. Let's just use an example from my book here. You're climbing stairs. So you're climbing stairs and your heart starts beating faster. Okay. Just work with me on this. And so what's the thoughts that you might be having? Well, I'll just help us to get along with the time here. You might be thinking, I can't handle this. It feels like I'm having a heart attack. It feels like I'm going into panic. And so what are the feelings that might come with that, Carl? Well, you told us perhaps feelings or sensations of fear. The heart is racing. We're feeling warm and anxious. And then what's the behavior that will come out of that? Stop climbing the stairs. It's called the false promise of avoidance. So all of a sudden, you're opening your salon and there's all this panicky stuff going on, you're fearing. And so you could have closed the salon, but instead you took the opposite action and you fought your way through it, and you found a way to manage this feeling that comes up with anxiety. What it says here is that the short-term consequences of having less fear, so not climbing the stairs, not opening up the salon, not facing the monster of anxiety, actually the long-term consequences are you create more fear. And I'll leave you with this, and I really want you to come back at me on this one. How do you create more fear by stopping climbing the stairs? Well, now you're afraid of your heart beating because you know what it feels like to have a panic attack, and you're afraid of climbing stairs. It's in
Yeah.
you. You didn't learn that the body can handle a panic attack, and you didn't learn that not all fast heart rates will result in a panic attack. So what you did, man, is you actually took this whole thing that started with a single thought, you weaponized it, you opened a business, you created this platform with your bike ride, and now you're serving the world and everybody like you as a quiet warrior, and you faced it and you learned, hey, you're focusing on the bottom of the equation. The bottom of that equation is you're raising the bar on the fact that you can cope with bad things happening because you develop these superpowers. Now I'm all worked up and excited here, and I'm totally into this with you, Karl. I'm going to shut up now and turn it back to you. What I just said, I want you to tell me fact, fiction, true, whatever you want, and then we'll move to wrapping this up.
I absolutely 150% agree. I think anxiety creates more anxiety. It's easy to quit. I'm a strong and firm believer that if you can battle your way through and take that anxiety and face it in the face and say, okay, like what can I do to change the scenario? And I find if you actually go deep into the scenarios and the fear, that in my case, the trigger point is a fear. I think you have to understand what your trigger points are first. And then once you've got your trigger points sorted out, it's then how do I align myself to say, is this factual? Is it fear? False experiences appearing real. That's what I believe fear stands for. So is it real? No. Is it happening? No. But it's the side effects of something that possibly could happen. Happens. It's like when I ride my bike on the road. After I was hit back in March in 2019 by a truck on Esplanade. And the sound of a car coming from behind me now it's a fear. Now I can pull over, I cannot ride my bike anymore, or I can do the necessary precautions or prepare that I have visual, I've seen, I've got more lights and things, and I'm in control of what happens in front of me, Tom. I'm aware of what happens on the sides of me. But
Yeah.
I don't know what's happening behind me. So I have to rely on my own will, my own confidence that I've done
Yes.
my part when I ride my bike. I'm not going to stop riding for the sake of that. I have to keep riding, Tom. It's like you going into the bathtub, right? You're not going to not go in the bathtub because you slipped and fell, but you are going to have a constant reminder every time you do something like that. So my thought going back to on that would be absolutely, I mean, fear creates more fear and it feeds from it. And success does the same thing too, Tom. So if you're going to be surround yourself with successful people, what's going to happen? You're going to be successful. If you start thinking success, you will be success. So the other thing I would like to add too, my journey with Ride 365 was also about promoting physical activity for mental health. So in my case, it was a bicycle. So, but if you like to hike, if you like to walk, if you're a runner, if you like to work out with gyms or whatever it may be, I believe doing something consistently over and over again, maybe not 365 days, but that was my journey. But if you was to keep going and you make that time a priority, you will start changing your body pattern, first of all. So if you are suffering from anxiety and panic, there are times of your day which are either going to be more anxious or more panic. So what happens is when you change your heart rate and you start working out, you lose weight, my resting heartbeat when I first started, Tom, was 69 beats a minute. I am down to now 54 beats a minute at rest. So I've got this new watch.
It's remarkable. Yeah.
And it's great. It's phenomenal, right? Because what's done, I've just lowered,
Yes.
seconds of my life.
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing. So I feel more at calm because I've created that. So I'm all about, Ride 365 is all about creating and promoting physical activity for better mental health.
That's amazing. And everybody, when you check out the website, and I know the video, I keep talking about this video, we're going to, with Karl's permission, weave it into the production of the YouTube video, but it's remarkable. And the other day, Karl, I was honored, but Karl brought in a shirt that he had from that ride with, it was littered with signatures. I mean, these are, yeah, it's right there behind you. There you go. I mean, professional athletes, people from the community. This was a big, big deal by a very humble man. And now every time I see you, Karl, in the restaurant, the first thing I think about is, how was your ride today? Because I know that you're resilient.
Yeah.
And Karl told me a story the other day. He wrote something on social media that he fell 5 times, but he got up on the 6th. And I went, oh my God, I'm going to see him tonight, and he's going to have bandages all over his head. And it was about, getting flat tires and things, but that's the superpower, the resilience you have. And I want you to know this, that in the corporate sector and in the business world, you're an entrepreneur. I think you do one of the hardest things, running your own business, because you have to wear all hats, take all the risk. But as I do, and I teach and I develop leaders, that's part of my company, they say that people like you will be rated more on character than just skills. And so character, just to quickly define it, means your natural strengths and limitations. And when you develop a strength that's not innate in your personality, that's developing character. When you eliminate a weakness that you've discovered, that's developing character. And when people see the change, it's like, oh my God, sing from the rooftops. This man, Karl, understood his natural limitations of catastrophizing and overreacting in his mind to thoughts. It's a thinking pattern. It wasn't put there by him. It was put by somebody else by accident. And he took that and he shifted, developed character. The last quote I'm going to leave you with, and shared this with you privately, is that Tony Robbins, who's a mentor of mine, said, you'll be remembered by what you do in private, not just by what you do in public. And so in seeing you and knowing you and all the people and fans you have, you live what you breathe. You teach and you live what you breathe. And what you do with your ride, Karl, is not for ego. I see that. It's really for the purpose of helping other people. I want to close the interview now with a couple things to honor you. And this has been a lot of fun, Karl, and we could talk for another hour. And I wrote down on my paper here, and I'm just reaching for it as I talk. These are not scripted. I just write down words, so I call them leadership words for what I hear coming out of you. The first one is courage, man. You're an incredible, courageous man. I love that about you. Fearless. I mean, you've conquered fear. You've looked it in the face. Anybody rides at 4 a.m. through Stanley Park here, which the monsters are in the bushes in our minds, you are fearless. 3 is resilience. Again, one of the characteristics of a CEO or a top business leader, the people I hang with to teach, is resilience. And you have that because of the adversity from your own mental health. And the last one is love, Karl. There's something about you. It comes from you, but you speak from a point of emotion, but it's authentic. And so I want to honor you with those 4 words. I'll be putting them somewhere where people can read them. And I might even create a meme and give that to you. I also now want to give you the award. And we talked about this, so I'm going to maybe make you a little embarrassed here, hopefully. But Karl, when I created the show, and if you can see behind me on my screensaver, there's this image. Looks a lot like a guy I know. And that is the Quiet Warrior Award, which I'm inducting you now into the Quiet Warrior tribe. This is a big deal. I want you to know this. When I created my show, I said not everybody's going to come on the show. It'll be people who have gone through adversity and turned it into something to change the world, who will come and share everything for not fearing what people will think. And that's you. So I created this award, and it's called a challenge coin, and they're handcrafted and painted. And they're legit. They're 2-sided. The front side has the image of the show. The back, actually, Karl, it's beautifully done and raised lettering, the illustration of the hero's journey narrative by Joseph Campbell, which is everything that I live and breathe through this show that you You are one. It comes in a cherry box, and soldiers carried these in World War I. That's where they originated. They would have them in their pockets if you showed up without yours. Maybe you had to buy drinks or buy dinner, but they really carried them for community. Today, you can find these coins with first responders, with AA, with community groups. They're all over the world. So this is the Quiet Warrior coin, and less than 50 people in the planet of 8 billion will carry them each year through my show. And now I want you to know that by receiving it, you commit to continuing with action and purpose and changing people's lives. You're going to be connected to all of those who carry them by a thread in your story, and eventually I hope we all will meet. So, Karl, it's my honor to induct you into the Quiet Warriors.
Thank you. Thank you.
I wish I could draw a little British guy with gray hair on there. But when I step aside, that sure as hell looks a little bit like you on there. So I think we must be brothers of another mother, except for that little tinge in my skin. Karl, the last word goes to you. Please tell us where people can find your body of work, your websites, get a hold of you, whatever you want.
Yeah, so the website pretty much says it all. I mean, you can always reach out anytime on the website. You can also find me on social media platform, which is Facebook. My photography, that part of the equation, is also on Instagram and Facebook. So on all levels, you can certainly reach out to me anytime if there's any questions or anything that you would like to share. I think you have to be part of that. My video is called Time, and it's about not just talking, it's about giving people time. You can either give people or you can make people time. So I would prefer to say, if you want to reach out for me anytime, I will make time to talk and share with you. So thank you very, very much.
All right. You see that on the screen there. We're doing live broadcasting and somebody on LinkedIn. Thank you, Chris McPherson. Chris said, great show. Thank you. It's just awesome. So there's a fan of yours right there. So everybody, check out the website, ride365.ca. And now Karl and I are going to collaborate. We'll release this as a podcast in the near future, as well as a YouTube premiere video. What does that mean? If you go to the YouTube channel, Tom Dutta, that's my name, and subscribe to the channel, when we put the premiere up, it'll be scheduled. Start a watch party, and everybody have a ball, give it a rating, and honor Karl and his work and his mission. So, Karl, thank you for coming on the show, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Live with passion like you hear Karl does. Live that purpose, and, hey, live the life that you deserve and desire. Thank you, Karl.
Thank you.
All right, stand by.
What if our world couldn't be around? What if our time was counting down? Numbers falling, fading from the wall, disappearing with silent calls. I don't know where we'll be in time, but if I'm with you, I'm sure I'll be fine. Together we'll stop time. We'll stop time. And if we can be together, we'll be alright. And we'll stop time. Close your eyes, my dear. Close your eyes and I'll hide you from this fear.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.create.ca